Welcome to the Allpax gasket cutting system. This ingenious system gives you the right size gasket for almost any job at hand, whether you work in an environment like this, or this, or this. With the Allpax gasket cutting system, you can easily and quickly cut even the most complex gaskets, from less than an inch up to 60 inches in diameter. Allpax is the original gasket cutting system. And when we talk about the Allpax system, we're really talking about two different products. The Allpax extension gasket cutter, which is a compass-style blade cutter, and Allpax hollow punches, a clean cutting punch system for smaller holes from an 1/8 inch up to 2 inches in diameter. We'll start with the Allpax extension gasket cutter. In this simple demonstration, I'll show the parts of the tool, I'll show you how to make accurate cuts, and give you some tips that will have you using the tool and cutting gaskets in no time. These are the components of the system. You have the main cutter block assembly. There are 3 pivot post bolts, called pivot posts, for different diameter cuts. Here are 2 pins, one for thick gasket material and one for thinner stock. These are extension bars. This is the piercing tool to mark the center of the cut. This is the cutting board, and this is the cutting knob to assist in making small diameter cuts. Since this is a complete system, you'll also get a screwdriver for blade adjustment, blades, and a storage case to protect the cutter and keep all the components together. Let me show you the main cutter block assembly. Just pick it up like this. The indents fit comfortably in your hand. This slot down the center of the tool is for the pivot posts. I'll show you those in a moment. On the end, you've got a retaining plate with 2 screws to hold the blade. On the bottom, you'll see 2 different scales. The upper scale. This one goes from 0 to 12 down the length of the tool, for cuts up through 12 inches. Most of the time, you use this scale. You'll use it for cutting material up to 12 inches in diameter, and with the extension bars. The smaller scale on the other side is only used for small diameter cuts, anything less than 2 inches in diameter. Notice that the slot on this side of the block is indented. This keeps the pivot posts and the extension bars aligned. Now, you can use this tool in 3 ways. Use the lower small scale for making small diameter cuts. You can use the scale on top to make large diameter cuts up to 12 inches in diameter. And you can add extensions to make cuts up to 5 feet in diameter. As you can see from the samples on our workbench, the tool works with almost any gasket material you can imagine, up to 3/4 inches thick. In any case, the first thing you do is to adjust the blade to the correct cutting depth. This is the material I'll use for this demonstration. I'll start by loosening these 2 screws and extend the blade so it just cuts through the depth of the material, but I'll make sure it doesn't cut too deep. If you're cutting thicker material, you should make several passes, increasing the cut depth on each pass. There, that ought to do it. Now, let's look at these pivot posts. There are 3 of them, and they are similar. Choose a pivot post according to the diameter of the piece you're trying to make. When you use the lower scale for diameters up to 2 inches, use the pivot post with the built-in pin. For cuts from 2 to 12 inches, use the pivot post with the thicker head. Whenever you use an extension, or for cuts beyond 12 inches, you use this pivot post with the thinner head to accommodate the extensions. Which one you select depends on how you plan to use the tool. The pivot post with the thick head is used with the top scale on the block for cuts up to 12 inches in diameter. Let's start with that one. Hold the tool with the scale facing you and slip the post through the slot. The rounded end goes toward the 0 end of the scale. Slip the washer on the back and attach the thumb screw. The top of the post has a guide that is used to measure the size of the cut. Let's make a 6-inch diameter cut. Loosen the thumb screw a bit, line the guide up with the 6, and hand tighten. Before you start, locate the center of the hole. So you take the piercing tool and make a small pilot hole. The hole doesn't have to be too big. If you make the hole too big or you make it oblong, you end up cutting a lopsided hole. Now you need the center pin. And there are 2 center pins, depending on the thickness of the material. Usually you'll only need this shorter one. Put the center pin through the pilot hole you just made. Now let's get the cutting board. Notice the two guides called center pin ferrules. One is in the center and one in the corner. You use the center for small radius cuts, like the one we'll be making, and you use the corner for larger radius cuts. So, we take the center pin and position it in the ferrule, and we're ready to go. Take the cutting block. You'll notice the hole in the pivot post here next to the guide. Carefully place that over the center pin. To make the cut, you simply rotate the block clockwise, keeping pressure on the surface till you've completed the cut. You always cut the outside diameter first. You can see that if you have a clean pilot hole, you'll get a smooth, even cut. But if you have a sloppy pilot hole, then you'll have an oblong cut. Now, let's readjust the block to cut a 2-inch ID in this piece. Loosen the thumb screw and position the guide to 2 inches and tighten the thumb screw. We already have the pilot hole, so we'll put the block over the pin and make the cut as before. The result is a 2-inch, 150-pound flange gasket. Now, let me show you how to use the gasket cutter to make those smaller holes, such as bolt holes. For this, select the pivot post with the offset pin. Place it in the slot on the tool, with the pin oriented closest to the blade. Not away from it, but towards the blade. If you put this in backwards, the measurements on the scale won't be accurate. Replace the washer. Now, position the pivot post using the smaller scale. Let's make a 5/8-inch bolt hole. Align the pivot to the 5/8 mark on the lower scale and hand tighten. When you use the smaller scale on the tool, you use the cutting knob. It makes it easier to hold your work. I'll use the old flange gasket as a template to locate the bolt holes. After that, the procedure is basically the same. You make a pilot in the center of the bolt hole. But with the smaller holes, you use the pin on the thumb screw as the guide pin. Put the pin through the pilot hole, press it into the center of the cutting knob. Then you rotate the cutting knob to make the cut. Many maintenance professionals find it faster to use punches to cut small holes such as these. You use the primary pivot post for all the cuts along this scale. But for cuts bigger than 12 inches OD, we'll use the extending bars and the extension pivot post. That's the one with the thin head. Look at the extension bars. The flat extension bar with 3 holes in it is the single extension. And this one, with the flush-mounted bolt, the positioning stud, and the 2 holes, is used when you add additional extensions. Each one adds 12 inches to the cut. So if you use the single extension, you add 12 inches. If you use the single and the compound extension together, you add 24 inches. And if you add another extension, you add another 12 inches, up to 60 inches. The single extension always goes on the main block first. The end with the single hole goes in the groove. Then put the pivot post through the extension. Put the washer and the thumb screw back on. To get the adjustment for your cut, use the large scale, just as you did before. But this time, add 12 inches for each extension you've got on the tool. Here we've got a single extension. That's 12 inches. So using 2 on the scale would be a 14-inch OD cut. Using 3 on the scale equals 15-inch OD, and so on. I'll set the guide to 10 on the scale, which gives me 22 inches OD. The rest is the same. You make a center hole, put the pin in your material. You put in the centering pin, and then put it in the ferrule. But this time, we'll use the ferrule in the corner of the board. When you put the tool on the pin, use the outside hole. Always use the outside hole. The inside hole is only for the compound extensions. Now we'll make the cut. When using the corner ferrule, rotate the material counterclockwise as you make your cuts. There we go. The next step is to reset the scale to cut the inside diameter. When using the corner ferrule, rotate the material counterclockwise as you make your cuts. And here's a flange gasket for a 14-inch pipe. Let's add another 12 inches by putting on a second extension bar. Take the extension and put the flush-mounted bolt through the outside hole. The positioning stud sets into the other hole. Tighten the extension using the thumb screw with the narrow threads. Done. Both thumb screws have to be facing the same way, or this one gets in the way of the blade. 2 extensions add 24 inches to the cut. So 2 on the scale makes a 26-inch cut. 3 on the scale would be 27 inches OD, and so on. The process is the same, even when making a large diameter cut like this. The first step is to locate your pilot hole. Make sure you have enough material around the edges to make a complete cut without running off the edge. Next, place your pin in the pilot hole and secure it. Now you can make your cut. Always remember, use the outside hole on the extension. Just like before, cut the outside diameter first. Now, I'll reset the cutting block for the inner diameter. After removing one of the extension bars, now we'll make the ID cut. It's that easy to make even the largest gaskets with the Allpax compass-style cutter. With our system, you'll be equipped to quickly fabricate the right size gasket for almost any job at hand. You can visit us on the web at www.allpaxcorp.com. Thanks for watching.